Hi guys, and welcome to A Beginner's Guide to Skyrim, Part 4. Now in Part 3 I did suggest that I was going to cover textures and meshes in this video, but I'm actually only going to cover textures. It is actually a reasonably large and important subject all by itself. So let's get started and replace those terrible low resolution textures that come with the vanilla game. Now, believe it or not, the first thing we're going to do regarding textures is not actually install a mod, but make sure we have got the official high-res DLC installed. This is just a free DLC that gives you high-res versions of the vanilla textures. Bethesda released it for free. There's no reason not to use it. It does improve a lot of the textures in game, even though there are some mods out there that will improve it further. Now, it's difficult to see the improvement in these shots here because you're looking at a rendered video, but in game you can see the difference, especially when you look up close. I mean, let's be honest, the vanilla textures, especially up close, are, well, they're pretty horrific. They look very smooth. It looks like there's no feeling to whatever the material's made of. Wood looks very, very smooth. It looks slightly blurred. Leaves and tree bark look equally smudged and smooth, whereas with the high-res pack, they look a lot sharper, a lot crisper, and you get the feeling that if you ran your hand over them, you'd be able to feel the material. Now, as I said, watching this on a YouTube video on 1080p, you're not going to get the full effect. You're not going to see it because the video quality, unfortunately, is not as good as the quality of your image in-game. But trust me, in-game, you will see the difference. It's not as big a difference as some of the modded textures you can get. Those are even better, but it is noticeable. Actually, it is very noticeable on clothes. If you look at this shot here, the difference between the vanilla and the high-res is actually quite pronounced. But there is another good reason for using this DLC, and that is the faces. The vanilla textures give the faces a very blocky look. If you look at this face now, look at the nose, look at the lips and the chin. It's a lot more noticeable on the nose, but you'll see there's like lots of little squares. And in fact, the entire face is covered with these. If you look closely enough in game, you can see them. Again, very hard to see in this shot. Whereas if you look at the same face with the high-res pack installed, you can see that the skin is a lot smoother. In fact, you just can't see those little squares anymore. So that is a massive improvement. So overall, this DLC is pretty essential, and in fact, many people quite happily use this and no other texture mods. It is fairly good. So we're going to install the Skyrim High Resolution Texture Pack, the official DLC. And it is not a mod, so we are not going to be downloading it from Nexus or any other site. We get it from Steam. You get it in the same place you get the Skyrim game. And you can actually see which DLC you have if you right-click and go along to View Downloadable Content. As you can see, for me, I've got all of them. And once you've got the Skyrim High Resolution Texture Pack, it will appear in your list. It will appear in your list of DLC here, and it will be installed in your game. And you can't actually uninstall it. It's kind of the same as the other DLC. Don't worry, you can deactivate it at any time, but it will always be on your game. It will always be there as an option for you to turn on and off. Now, if you go along to the Store tab and find the Skyrim High Resolution Texture Pack free DLC, it's pretty easy to find. You should be able to find a link to it from the Skyrim Store page. And it will have a button saying something like Install Now. As you can see, I already have it installed, so I don't have to do this. You'll click that button and it will give you some instructions, click OK here, and then it will start downloading. And it really is that easy. It will be downloaded to your system. If you are using the big picture interface for Steam, the process is pretty similar. Just go along to your library, click on the Skyrim game and go to this option, More, and hit Downloadable Content. And you get all the downloadable content for this game It's this one, the Skyrim High Resolution Texture Pack. Click on that, and when you click down here, you can add to cart. Now if I do it, it will actually fail to update because I already have it, so it's completely pointless. Once those DLC files have downloaded, if you go along to your data folder, you will find 3 BSA files marked High-Res Texture Pack 01, 02 and 03. Those are the resources. Those are the actual textures that are going to be used, and you will find ESP files to match them. 3 ESPs, 1 for each of the BSA files. You are going to need to activate those. So go along to Nexus Mod Manager, where you will now find the 3 ESPs in your list. Select all 3. You can select one but not the others if you want. I have no idea why you would do that. All it would mean is you get some of the textures but not all. I couldn't tell you which textures you would get and which you wouldn't. There is no real reason not to use these high-res textures. They form a good base upon which to build and add new textures, and they really aren't that large that they're going to cause you many problems. You should also install the unofficial high resolution patch. If you've been following this series, you already have the unofficial Skyrim patch, Dawnguard, Hearthfire and Dragonborn patch. Now you're going to do the unofficial high resolution patch. It just basically tweaks and fixes a few things, optimizes some textures and so on. Well worth installing, very easy to install. Simply download with Manager, and once it has finished downloading, activate, and you're done. The load order is fairly important. I would actually once again recommend closing down Nexus Mod Manager and running Boss. Hopefully you have installed that if you've been following the video series. Well worth installing. And there you go. Load order is high-res texture packs right at the top of the ESP files. All of the files above here are ESMs, and as I've mentioned before, ESM files always come first. Master files at the top, plugins below. And as you can see, high-res texture pack at the top, followed by the unofficial patches, which is the exact order given here on the mod page. So, you're done. So now it's time to actually look at some unofficial texture packs. And the one I've chosen for this video is the Skyrim 2K texture pack. Now, this is the most popular texture mod. It's probably the oldest, actually. I can't remember many before it, but it's certainly the one I remember appearing right at the start. And it is a fairly massive overhaul of the textures. And as you can see, the difference between the official high-res one and this mod is actually noticeable even in this video. These textures look slightly different to the official ones, and they are higher quality. In fact, they are 4 times the size of the official ones. Now obviously that is a bit of a performance hit, and I am going to discuss the downsides to these type of mods later on. But I'm hoping you've also noticed that as some of these scenes change, some of the textures don't. They remain the same, and that is because this mod, although it replaces a lot of textures, it doesn't replace them all. And now you can see the reason for actually using the official high-res DLC as well. You should also be aware that there are 2 versions of this mod. There is the 4K version, which we're looking at now, and then there is the 2K version. And obviously that is half the size, which has implications, as I will discuss later on. And of course, the million-dollar question is, what's the difference between the 2? Can you see it? And my honest answer is, at the resolution I play, which is 1920 by 1080, not really. However, everyone is different. Some people are more sensitive to textures than I am, and if you are playing on a much higher resolution, you will spot the difference. But if you're playing on a lower resolution, you may not notice the difference. And I encourage you to take that into consideration when choosing which version to use. If you can get away with using the 2K version and you don't notice any difference, I would highly recommend doing so. Again, I will talk about why a little later on. So we're going to install Skyrim HD 2K textures, and if you go along to the file section on the Nexus page, you will see quite a lot of files. Now at the time of making this video, it was up to version 1.6, but most of the files are for version 1.5, and it has an update for 1.6, and that's just for Riften. So what you're going to need to do is download. For example, if you want the full version, you need to download the full version for Dungeons, Downloaded Manager, Landscape, Miscellaneous, and Towns. The rest of those files are for the light version, and then the full version for Riften. And of course, if you're installing the light textures, Downloaded Manager on the 4 light texture packs and the light update. If this has changed by the time you watch this video, you will have to adapt a little bit. Now, in actual fact, I've clicked Download with Manager on all of them to get all of the files so that I can install both. And you might want to think about doing that yourself so that you can try out the light textures and the full textures and decide for yourself which you're going to use. Now, these files are rather large, and so they may take quite some time for you to get all of them. I'd suggest clicking all of them and letting them download at once and then going off and getting a drink. It does take a little time, but there you go, finally finished. I have now got the 4 main files for the full version, the 4 main files for the light version, and the update. There you go, the updates for Riften for the full and the light. And I'm going to start by installing the light version. And it's fairly easy. I'm just going to select the main files, the light for Dungeons. Same for Landscape. When you get asked this, just select No. It will carry on installing normally. And do Miscellaneous and Towns next. Same procedure. Now, in my case, I have got quite a few of the mods installed. You probably will not get this message, but on the off chance that you have installed a few of the mods and you get such a message, you have to decide, are you going to overwrite the textures that already exist? And so as you can see, male Draugr gauntlets have already been installed by A Midian Born Book of Silence. Now, this is a mod that really does improve the textures of armors. I really do like the textures from this mod, so I'm going to select No to Mod. This mod will not overwrite that one. You will have to make that decision yourself. If you've installed some of the mods, you will have to decide which one wins. I would generally suggest, you could actually go through these like yes and no, one file at a time. I would generally suggest clicking either no to mod or yes to mod. You just decide one of these mods will win. And in this case, I'm going to let A Midian Born Book of Silence win. So no to this mod. It's only a few textures. And then Towns. Now, I've got the 1.5 version installed, but there is an update, and that is the 1.6, and I need to select the correct one. I'm doing light, and it's an update for Riften. So there you go. Install this. And you're done. You now actually have Skyrim HD 2K textures installed, the light version. That's the ones with the 2K textures. There are no ESP files, so no load order issues at all. And that's it, the light version done. So let's assume that you've installed the light version, you have gone into game, you've tried it out, you've seen what it has to offer, and now you want to try the full version. The operation is pretty simple. First of all, reverse what you did to install the light version. Just select the 1.6 update and disable, then click. I would do these in the same order you installed them. Well, sorry, the reverse order. I don't think it actually matters. In fact, I'm fairly sure it doesn't. It's just a good habit to get into. And there you go. I now have the Skyrim HD 2K textures light completely uninstalled. That's all it took. A few seconds. And then I repeat the first process, installing, but this time for the full. So on the Dungeons, start at the top, do dungeons, landscape, miscellaneous, towns, and when that is finished, do the update for Riften. Again, no when asked that question, and depending on your mods, if you get asked to overwrite either yes to mod or no to mod, I'm guessing for most of you, you will not get that last message. And there you have it. The full version is now installed and you can go check it out. Now, there are a lot of texture overhauls, a lot of texture packs that replace, say, entire cities, or texture packs that replace just rocks or just snow. And you may find such a texture mod that you really want to install, and of course you're going to ask, can you install it alongside Skyrim 2K? And the answer is yes. The easy way to do it is to simply install it over the top. There are complicated ways if you want to mix and match from different texture packs, but that's out of the scope of this video. But, for example, if you found a mod such as A Medium-Born Landscape 1, which changes bridges, roads and dirt, and you think to yourself, I really like that, it's not a problem, it's very easy to install. Simply go along to the file section and choose the version you want, in this case the 1K or the 2K, and once it is downloaded, simply activate and you will get the expected message telling you that you are about to overwrite some textures from the Skyrim HD 2K Textures pack, and I'm going to click yes to mod. And that's it. I now have the A Medium-Born bridges and roads without any real problems. And more importantly, you now have the knowledge and the skills to install most of the texture mods out there without any problems. There are some advanced subjects, there are some mods that allow you to mix and match texture packs, or there is a mod called Automatic Variants, which I have done a video about, and that allows you to use multiple textures for the same monster, the same creature, and it applies them randomly, which gives you far more variety, which is actually a really nice mod. And there are yet more advanced subjects such as texture optimization and so on, and I will briefly touch upon those now because I do want to talk about the downside of modding your textures. The first and most obvious downside is performance. The larger the textures, the more textures you have loaded, the more memory you use, the more stress you put on your graphics card and so on. Your performance is going to go down. It's inevitable. It's almost impossible to avoid. Keep that in mind. If you have to choose between 1K and 2K textures, or 2K and 4K textures, check to see if you really can see the difference. It's well worth going down a step if it keeps your performance up. Again, that's going to be a personal taste issue. If you are more bothered by bad quality textures than you are frame rate, perhaps you don't mind the performance hit. If you're bothered by frame rate, perhaps you want to lower the texture quality. But the second disadvantage to texture modding is probably the most important. I released a video recently discussing an absolute limit there is with Skyrim's memory, the RAM. How much RAM it can use before your game becomes unstable, before it crashes, and it's 3.1 gigabytes. And it would seem that Skyrim by default clones all the textures that are in the graphics card in memory as well, and of course that fills up that 3.1 gigabyte rather quickly. In fact, just with the mods I've shown you to install here, you're probably going to be pushing 2 to 2.5 gigabytes in some places quite easily. So already we're up at the limit, if you're using the 4K textures, that is. Now, all is not lost, do not worry. There are ways around this. There's a very new and exciting mod called EN Boost, and this changes the way the memory is handled with regard to textures, and that does seem to work. But this mod is actually not trivial to install and set up, so possibly something you want to check out when you get more comfortable with modding your game. There is also another technique called texture optimization, which is a good thing to do anyway because it would improve performance and can fix glitches, but that's quite a heavy process and probably a little too much at the moment if you're a beginner. I am going to do a series of videos on that, and hopefully that will explain it for people. But in the end, there is no getting around the need for a little common sense. Just don't overload your mods too much. Don't use 4K textures if you cannot see the difference. I can't see the difference at my resolution between 4K and 2K. I can barely see the difference between 2K and 1K textures, to be honest, and frankly, I'll generally choose the 1K textures. Just err on the side of caution, don't go crazy, and, you know, use some common sense, as I said. Oh, I will mention one last thing with regards to this issue. It's not necessarily about the number of texture mods you install, because of course, for example, when I installed A Midian Bourne's Bridges and Roads, the landscape mod, it overwrote the Skyrim HD textures. So it didn't add new textures, it just replaced them. And in fact, those textures were smaller than the ones I installed with Skyrim HD. So technically, adding that third mod improved my performance slightly. So it's not as simple as just keeping the number of mods down. It's all about the size of the textures, the number of textures that get loaded into memory, and other things. It's not just textures, it's just textures are the main problem because they are so large. Okay guys, that is about it for this video. The next episode will come out fairly soon, I think, and it will be about meshes. They are fairly important to improving the visuals on your game, so that will be part 5. You guys, of course, are more than welcome to join me for that video, and until then, as always, have fun.